And if it's true, if realism is true, and that somehow these structures are divine in nature, they originate from God, whether you're a pantheist or you're a theist or you're a panentheist, you're a pagan, you're a Christian, you're some form of realist in this way, then what happens is that basic perception is already a mystical experience. So you want a mythologized world, you're already in it the moment you embrace realism. And now the reason I think that's so important is because rather than saying, well, there's a mystical side where we think about the occult and all that sort of stuff, and then there's a materialist side, rationalist side, and you create them separate, you treat them separately. I think the key is once you really embrace realism and you understand a realist metaphysic, you realize that it's all mystical. The world is mythologized. Yes, sure, it's haunted with spirits, angels, demons, God, all this sort of stuff. Yeah, that's real. You're a spiritual being, afterlife, all this sort of stuff. Sure, morality, all the rest. But even prior to that, just at the basic level of you existing in a structured way and you perceiving those structures, that basic level of existence is already mystical.
Yeah.
And I think if you can grasp that, now reason can begin to come in and provide some guidance, some discernment, right? About, what are the structures of morality? What are the spirits I should be talking to and shouldn't be talking to, right? Reason can start to have that say that's been sort of pushed to the side without in any way nullifying the pursuit of the mystical. So that would be my pitch.
That reminds us that this distinction that everybody makes very categorically between real things or thinkers and the patterns within them or thoughts is really a continuum. It's very much a continuous measure that's up to the eye of an observer to note. And so that then suggests the following, which we are now just beginning to. This is something that Josh Bongard and I and Richard Watson and Chris Fields and some others are starting to think about, which is what if you turn the standard computing paradigm on its head? So normally you have these Turing machines, you got the machine, and that's the agent doing things, and then you've got its memory tape, and so it's writing things. And so what if you look from the perspective of the tape? So, and in fact, not just the tape itself, but the patterns on the tape, because in a certain sense, they run the show. The machine is going to do what it does based on what the information on the tape says. And so you can imagine with these. So now back to memories as agents. So imagine this continuum. So you've got these. You've got fleeting thoughts. So these are patterns that run through a cognitive system and then, if it wink out of existence, they disappear. So they're very short lasting. But then you've got some persistent thoughts or recurrent thoughts that are kind of difficult to get rid of. And we know from clinical psychiatry that there are those kinds of thoughts that once they establish in certain minds, they're hard to get rid of, depressive thoughts and obsessive thoughts and things like that. And in fact, some of these thoughts do something interesting. They do a kind of niche construction, meaning that they actually, the more you have those thoughts, the easier it is to have more of those thoughts. They literally change the brain. There have been studies on how brain ultrastructure changes with those kinds of thoughts. That makes it easier to continue having that cycle, right? So these kinds of thoughts are a little more permanent. They're a little more, they contribute a little more to their own survival. They're in fact changing the thinker by their presence. And then you sort of move up the spectrum and you can say, well, what about dissociative identity disorder, personality fragments? They are even more agential. They have goals. Some of them can talk. They will certainly affect the thinker in ways that changes how they persist and how others persist. And then eventually, then you have a full human personality. And then who knows what's after that, right? Transpersonal psychology suggests there may be something past that.
This is from a guy named Michael Ventura, who's a storyteller, not a therapist. You are not one person. You are many people. You are a community of moods and selves under one name. Parts of you aren't even human. They're part mammal, part reptile, part rose, part moon, part wind. And life is a question of which parts are dominant, which in effect possess you. I think most people walk around possessed by the dullest parts of themselves. This, the worst state of possession, is called normal. As we go inside and start meeting all these different parts of ourselves, usually that's what's in the foreground, the wounded children, all the childhood wounds, all that stuff. But if you keep going in and deeper, you start meeting things that aren't human. You start meeting things that don't come from your personal lifetime experience. So there's stuff inside our minds that's not from our own lifetime. That's really clear. Also, IFS has this idea, they originally called them critters, and in their attempt to be more respectable, they now call them unattached burdens. And these are things that are within us that are not friendly.
Done speech for the last 2 years, and she hasn't spoken a word in about 3 months. My wife used to be a worship leader, and the enemy took her voice, so now she's unable to worship.
She told me that her husband had this suicidal part in him, and that for years she'd told him that it had a good intention and that they could work with it. He'd said, "No, there is no good intention. It just wants me dead." She would not believe this because in IFS, all parts have good intention. Her husband went silent, figuring she just didn't understand.
I denounce the spirit of depression in all its forms. I denounce the spirit of suicidal thoughts.
You can imagine, and so this is a part that I left out about these patterns, these memory patterns that have to be reinterpreted from sort of time slice to time slice of a being. When you look at it from the perspective of the being themselves, you see that bow tie architecture. So you see that, okay, you're the recipient of a bunch of compressed information, and now you have to creatively expand that engram into what do I do now? The choice. Okay, that's from the perspective of the thinker. Now, from the perspective of the thought itself, it might be, and I'm much like with our basal cognition models, I'm certainly not claiming that these thoughts are high level agents like humans. I mean, some of them might be. The dissociative sub personality alters are close. I mean, they have a lot of those features, but some could be very low level intelligences. It doesn't, you don't have to be a high level self-reflective mind to be some kind of intelligence. But from the perspective of that system, what might your goals be? Well, one goal might be simply to persist. That might be a simple kind of Darwinian way to think about it. So from that perspective, if you're a pattern, what you would seek to do is to change yourself and also the thinker or the system around you in a way that makes it more easy for you to propagate into the future. Or, in fact, most likely that's not a sufficient story. Most likely you don't just want to persist. You want to expand into other spaces, which means you want to alter yourself in a way that would allow you to colonize as many other thinkers and as many other action spaces as you can.
Harry described this thing as being like 3 different colors of wax that had all melted together. 2 of these were parts of him, and the third was something else. I asked, "How are you feeling toward the thing that is not you?" I was looking for fear. A whole group of young parts were somewhat frightened. They agreed to go someplace safe and comfortable and have a couple of representatives watch what we were doing. They said their fear would not inhibit them or cripple them, but it was normal, like before a big battle. Then we returned to, how do you feel toward this thing that's not part of your system? When the fears were cleared, we worked with the 2 parts who were intertwined with it. One came out fairly easily, but the other one did not want to leave. The area where they were locked together now looked like a battlefield.
Mute spirits out of her now, in Jesus' name. I command you, on the count of 3, to leave her body. 1, 2, 3, out.
Do you think the presence of evil is kickstarting people to wonder about the good?
That's what happened to me.
That's what happened to you?
Oh yeah, I had a direct experience with it.
In the milieu of journalism or just?
Nope, in my bed at night, and I got attacked while I was asleep with my wife and 4 dogs in the bed and mauled. Physically mauled.
In a spiritual attack by a demon?
Yeah, by a demon. Or by something unseen that left.
Is that right?
Claw marks on my sides, on my...
So it left physical marks?
Oh, they're still there. Yeah. 1.5 years ago.
Was your wife terrified? I know you were.
I wasn't. I was totally confused. I woke up and I couldn't breathe and I thought I was gonna suffocate, and I walked around outside, and then I walked in and my wife and dogs had not woken up, and they're very light sleepers. And then I had these terrible pains on my rib cage and on my shoulder, and I was just in my boxer shorts, and I went and flipped on the light in the bathroom, and I had 4 claw marks on either side underneath my arms and on my left shoulder, and they're bleeding.
Wait, they were bleeding?
They're bleeding, yeah. No, they're actual claw marks.
Dreer is down for the culture war. He is fighting that culture war. He's in there with both fists on his blog, living in Budapest, doing it, writing these books. And then, of course, he writes this book on angels, demons, and UFOs. And it's like, and then, of course, today I see that Tucker Carlson has talked about being attacked by a demon. And it's our Orthodox friend from overseas who's doing the interviewing. And I'm thinking, oh, Pageau, I wish you were more wrong. Oh, gosh, Grimgris is going to clip the heck out of that. But that's how I'm feeling. It's wild. It's crazy. It's exciting. It's terrifying. But, baby, we're here.
But it also may just be psychological from us, or it may be from the demons. And we have to recognize in all humility that we probably don't have the discernment to distinguish one from another. Well, you know, the great saints and elders have that discernment. When we don't have that discernment, we tend to be pretty distrustful of ourselves, which is why we go to our spiritual father. But we are ever aware of the demonic world around us.
Then they sailed to the country of the Gerasenes, which is east of Galilee. Now, when Jesus stepped out on land, he was met by a man from the city of Gerasa, who was possessed with demons. For a long time he had worn no clothes and was not living in a house, but among the tombs. Seeing Jesus, he cried out with a terrible voice from the depths of his throat, and fell down before him in dread and terror, and shouted loudly, "What business do we have in common with each other? Jesus, Son of the Most High God, I beg you, do not torment me before the appointed time of judgment." Now he was already commanding the unclean spirit to come out of the man, for it had seized him violently many times, and he was kept under guard and bound with chains and shackles, but he would break the bonds and be driven by the demon into the desert. Luke 8:26-29, Amplified Bible.
So I'm not from a world where things like that happen. I never heard of anything like that happening before. I had no idea what that was. I knew it was spiritual immediately.
You did? Okay, that was going to be my question.
Yeah. I don't understand to this day. I'm not going to put it.
You didn't try to refute the spiritual part in your own mind. You went right into the.
Well, it didn't make any sense, and it doesn't now.
I was teaching IFS in a training, and in one of the little supervision groups I was doing, there was a woman who had this internal critical voice. Pretty much everybody has a part like that. But this one was just meaner than hell. In IFS, all parts are good. They have a good intention, even suicidal parts. We want to connect with them and welcome them in and gain cooperation and join with their positive intention. This thing had no positive intention. It just wanted to destroy her. And that's a characteristic of these, what you might call demons. Dick hates that word. Dick hates the word entity. He's trying to get away from all that. He thinks it's too woo-woo. He didn't want me writing my book or talking about this as publicly as I do. Anyway, she had this thing in her, and when she looked inside, it looked like a bloodshot eyeball with legs. And when we It had no good intention. When we asked it directly, it said, no, I'm not a part of her. I'm going to destroy you and her. You know, just pure hostility and hate. And using some very simple techniques, I was able to get it out of her. And I ended the little consultation group, went to the staff meeting, and my core body temperature dropped 3 or 4 degrees. I couldn't get warm. I found this very upsetting. I didn't want to believe crap like this was possible. And my other people on the training staff started teasing me. I became irate and attacked some of my old friends. It was ugly. And then that night I thought, I'm just going to pretend this did not happen. I mean, I don't, you know, this doesn't fit at all. And then that woman started sending me emails from the airplane and going home. She said, Bob, I didn't tell you this, but when I was a young woman, I was institutionalized many times and I tried to kill myself many times. Back then, when I tried to tell people about the non-human inside of me, they gave me electroshock and injected me full of terrible drugs. You're the first human being to ever believe me. Thank you. You've changed my life.
Somebody like me who is fundamentally secular in my understanding of the universe, it is pretty clear that there is something that is reasonably described as a spiritual dimension to the battle that we are engaged in. Not only does the opposition appear to be playing with demonic tropes for reasons I can scarcely imagine, but there is a recognition of this being a historical moment in the making, one way or the other, and that something well beyond our well-being as a modern people is at stake.
You have to leave her now. You have to leave her now.
And then we've got the sons of God, okay? And that really gets a little bit confusing because you have the sons of God and the daughters of men. All of the traditions, I would say, including the biblical traditions because of 2 Peter and Jude, have the original offending sons of God basically punished, sent to hell, sent to the abyss, okay? But the Nephilim come into this. Their offspring are not. They are not sent anywhere. Okay, they are, the offspring, the Nephilim, the Anakim, the Rephaim, all these terms. They are destroyed later, through, it takes a while, in biblical history. There's the conquest, there's the, Goliath with David and all that kind of stuff. So all the traditions you'll find, are unanimous that when one of these was killed or destroyed, their disembodied spirit is what the Gospels call a demon. So the demons, as we know them from the Gospel stories, are different than the sons of God who rebelled in Genesis 6. They're two different groups.
At some level, we can say that those religious terms are responsive to the critical battles and turning points in history, and they have encoded something very deep about how the population that got through those predicaments understood itself, and that we should probably be tapping into those toolkits, which frankly can go, hundreds of years without being needed. And so they are not the stuff that is familiar. We have to reach into something that goes beyond the regular toolkit.
I called my assistant, who was like the only evangelical Christian I know, well enough to call with something bizarre like that, totally bizarre like that. And she said, oh yeah, no, that happens. Yeah, people are attacked in their bed by demons. What? What are you even talking about? Yeah.
We can't stop worshiping. We can't stop seeking the mysterious, the mystical. We have a longing for something transcendent. We have a longing for a mythologized world. I think those things aren't just empty, vague longings. I think they're there for a reason. just like the reason we hunger for food, right? We hunger for the transcendent because there is such a thing as the transcendent.
St. Porphyrios' method is really the best, and that's to fight for Christ with your back to the demons, rather than trying to fight directly against the demons with your back to Christ. Having said all that, we do take the demonic very seriously. We're very cautious of it. And I've had experiences that have absolutely awakened me to not only how seriously we need to take the demonic, but also how much more power Christ has over the demonic.
Out! Out of him! Yeah!
Speak now.
Hallelujah!
Thank you, Jesus.
At the same time, we're not hyper-focused on it. We don't become obsessed with it. We don't give more attention than it's due. And I think this is spiritually one of the dangers that people make, is that when they do have something happening in their spiritual life that they feel is demonic, sometimes if you begin to really worry about it and give it more focus than it's due, you actually strengthen it.
So, I mean, I'm not leaving anything out, and I'm not pretending to understand that. I can only say what happened to me, and that did happen to me. And then I was seized with this very intense desire to read the Bible, which I then started without any study aids or anything. I bought a Bible that didn't have any. I'm not interested in editorializing in the Bible. I just want to read it and see what's in there myself. I have very low levels of trust for Christian pastors, most of whom, I'm just not a fan at all. And sorry to say that, but that's how I feel. And so I don't want to hear other people's opinions. I just want to see what's in there. And so I spent a year and a half reading it, and then I started rereading it. And it was just a transformative experience for me, but I'm not, holding myself out as someone from whom you could get theological advice, because I'm
Sure,
not.
of course.
I mean, I don't know. I don't understand any of it. But
Do
yeah,
you
that
think
happened
God
to me.
allowed the demon?
I have no idea what happened. All I know is I was dead asleep with my wife and dogs, and I woke up with claw marks on my rib cage underneath my arms, and it didn't even make sense. My arms would, anyway, whatever. No one has to believe me. I don't care.
It doesn't matter.
But that happened to me, and so I just was like, wow, that's real. Whatever that is, I'm not sure what it is.
It's
but
very real.
Mainstream IFS recognizes that we all have parts, mostly wounded children or protectors of the wounded children, and these parts can hijack us and take us over and drive the bus. A lot of times people going around this world are like 3-year-olds. They got 3-year-olds driving their bus, which is not too good. There's also in IFS something called the self, which is the witness function that's always there, and we want to get self in a leadership role. The model of healing in IFS is not homogenizing all these parts and turning a person into a unified mush. We need all the parts. It's like going from a civil war into an orchestra or a jazz band that plays really, really well together and cooperates. I think most human energy is wasted in internal conflict.
So I'm a big advocate of properly functioning faculties arguments, right? Like I think basically if you become skeptical about the reliability of your faculties, you have no place to go. And so epistemologically, I think it's important that you start from the presumption that your faculties are functioning properly, unless you have some specific reason to doubt otherwise, you're colorblind or something like that. But your faculties are functioning properly, and their purpose is to tell you true things about the world. Now, usually when people believe that, they start to believe, well, I should be an empiricist, right? That's why I don't believe in any of the God stuff or the ghost stuff or things like that. That's why just my 5 senses. But the fact of the matter is that once we start to take seriously the idea that our faculties are aimed at truth-telling, a lot more than just the senses open up.
For instance, people are sometimes surprised when they have what are their logis me? What are these random thoughts that comes up that's particularly kind of crazy? I'm driving down the road and out of the blue I have a thought with my kids in the back of the car to jerk the wheel and careen my car off the road and kill us all. And it's a fleeting thought, it's in and out. And I go, I've never had a thought like that before. What just happened? Well, if I give it hyper focus, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to strengthen it. I'm going to start worrying about it. I'm going to start giving it a power that it doesn't otherwise have. But if in those moments we can learn to say, I'm going to put my thoughts right back on Christ and just say, Lord, I know that thought was crazy. That didn't come from me. Clearly didn't come from you. Banish those thoughts from me and then go right back to your prayer life and your world of peace. You're going to be better off.
Once the demons left, how did you know they left? Were there voices and then they were gone?
I couldn't hear the voices anymore. I couldn't hear any type of it was literally like they were let out of a door and the door was closed. And it was soundproof. It was quiet. That was the first time that I ever experienced what it feels like to have peace in my mind. Like peace in my mind, no bad thoughts, nothing. Like just peace, happiness, joy. Like I felt joy. I was like, this is what joy feels like. I was like, this is better than any drug I've ever tried in my life. Like
At some point, I asked him to surround the being with a ball or egg-shaped container of light and pull it out of his body to a good conversational distance in front of him. He reported back that the being did not like being contained. I asked him to look for any connections back from that ball of light to his body. There were many. Many parts gave back to the being things it had given them. The strings and connections fell away. Harry asked his wife to move away from where she was sitting next to him. She moved across the room. As the connections weakened between Harry and the being yelled at his wife, "It's your fault! You loved him too much, you bitch!" The being felt it would have gotten him completely if it weren't for his wife's steady love throughout his addictions. I told the being, "We're not here to punish you or judge you. We're sending you to a place where you too can heal and transform."
The new way that I'm starting to explore now is, what if it's actually backwards? What if the physical body that we're looking at is the tape, and it's the bioelectric patterns that are really the driving agent, and that what we see when we look at the consequences of that, which are changes in second messenger function, gene expression, chromatin, epigenetic changes, and then finally cell behavior changes and morphogenetic changes. What if that's the tape, right? The physical body is the memory medium, and there's significant action going on at the level of the physiological patterns themselves.
I presume that conscience is not a malfunction. I presume it's telling us true things about the world. And in like manner, I think the sense of the numinous, just like Rudolf Otto argued against Immanuel Kant, right? Rudolf Otto had suggested that Kant's assessment of psychology and of our faculties was too limited because it left out the numinous. It left out this universal human experience of, what Otto would call the holy, right? The idea of the holy. But there's this broader sense that we as human beings all have this intuition that the world is haunted, right? Like I like to say that everybody believes in ghosts, even the hard-bitten atheist who says he doesn't. Because if you lock him in the abandoned insane asylum at night, he's scared. And it's not because he thinks a hobo lives there. Mm-hmm. And so he can try to reason that away and say, well, it's an evolutionary defect, yada, yada, yada. But the fact of the matter is, it's there, right?
I teach people all the time. I tell them one of the greatest spiritual tools I can give them is called the holy shrug. And the holy shrug is to take something that has happened and just say, yeah, okay, and go back to normal life.